customers. So it allows you to send messages, allows you to receive messages, allows you to make calls, receive calls, provide USSD services, and so on and so forth, and even payments. But Africa's Talking does not provide you with a way of understanding who your customer is. So if you look at the Africa's Talking dashboard, how many of you have used Africa's Talking before? Or have at least have a sense of what? So do you know what Africa's Talking does? Great. So Africa's Talking provides you with that API so that if you want to send messages to everyone in this room, you just call a simple endpoint, like say send message, and then Africa's Talking provides the infrastructure that plugs into Safaricom, Airtel, MTN in Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, all these different mobile operators, and then delivers that message on your behalf. And Africa's Talking then charges you for that service of delivering the SMS, making the call, and so on and so forth. And it's a 10-year-old business that is currently operating across Africa. So basically, if you have an idea and you want to build, let's say you want to build a fintech application that will send SMSs for notifications, or will allow users to dial a USSD and access their balances and so on, you can just log into Africa's Talking, create an account, and then you get access to all this infrastructure. So what Hilarion does is, Hilarion is basically helping you organize and build personalized experiences for your customers. So let's say I build an application for everyone in this room to pay for a hackathon, attend a hackathon, and learn more about the services that the company that's providing the hackathon has. So for me to build that application, I could build it, but then for me to make it relevant to each of you, I would need to personalize that experience for each of you. So one of you, for example, may be a Node developer, the other one may be a Java developer, someone may be working in one industry, the other industry. Some of you are students, some of you are working, and so on and so forth. So you all have different expectations on what this application is going to deliver to you. And one of the biggest challenges that developers face is how to store your data so that you can personalize this experience for your customers. So the SMS example, for example, let's say we want to send you notifications to remind you about the next hackathon. Some of you may respond better to SMS, some of you may respond better to email, some of you may respond better to WhatsApp, and so on and so forth. Some of you may have opened a WhatsApp session with me, so I can send you a free WhatsApp notification. How do I make that decision when I'm about to interact with the customer on which channel makes the most sense? When should I send this message? Which channel should I use? How frequently should I send this message? Let's say I've been sending you SMSs, but then they've been failing. How do I know that this number is no longer active? If I send you an email and you block me, how do I know that you've blocked me, so I shouldn't send you emails, and so on and so forth. So how do you build an application that will be personalized for all these users? And then on top of that, once you personalize, how do you scale this? So if you have 10,000 users, you have 100,000 users, how do you scale that experience to all these users? So basically that's what Hilarion comes to help you do. So Hilarion, behind the scenes, stores each customer's data. So each one of you will be given a small database table that stores your data. So Ian here will have his DB. Every user of your application will be given a database. And this database is where you can now store information on this particular user. So let's say you interact with user 1, you can store information on that particular user as you interact with Hilarion. So user 1 will have a way for you to store their messaging history, so you can see their last 100 messages. You can store their payments history. You can see how many SMSs you've sent. You can see which SMSs you've sent. You can see how they responded. You can see which voice sessions, if they called into your call center, you can see those call sessions. If they dialed into your USSD, you can see those USSD sessions. On demand, at any time in your application, you can actually access this database for that particular customer. So that's a very powerful concept, because you no longer need to be thinking about coding for 10,000 users, for 100,000 users. You just code for that one user that is going through your experience. So, and that's the most effective way of using Hilarion. So with Hilarion, the best way is to think about your customers. So let's say you've never seen this customer before, and you record that I have never seen this customer before. So the first thing I should do is maybe tell them about my application. So the first thing they need to know is this is an application that allows you to attend hackathons, know which hackathons have prices, blah, 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 prize money, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Now, the next time the customer accesses your application, Hilarion allows you to store that state of that customer. So in that database, quote unquote, that tiny table that you have for that user, you will have recorded that I have already told this customer about my product. So now they've dialed a USSD, I need to tell them these are the options. So do you want to attend the next hackathon? Do you want to pay for the hackathon? And so on and so forth. Then let's say that user is like, I want to attend the hackathon. So the next time they access your application, you're like, oh, this user has expressed interest in attending the hackathon. So these are the options. So these are the payment options. And then let's say they send you some money. So when they send you some money, you then update that this customer has sent you money. And now you're just telling them, hey, the hackathon is tomorrow. So you need to send them a reminder to attend the hackathon when the hackathon is due. So you basically write this very basic code where you're just capturing the state of the user at any one time and updating the state of that user as they go through that experience of working with your application. And ultimately, so you have access to their messaging history, you have access to their payments history, and Hilarion gives you different ways of storing other data on that customer. So you can store metadata for that customer. So metadata could be data like this is a male, female, their gender, you could store their date of birth, you could store their address, you could store anything that you think is relevant for this customer. Maybe their language preference, maybe they prefer to interact with you in Swahili versus English. You could store all this information that is about this particular customer. So that's metadata. The other thing Hilarion allows you to do is to store app data. So app data is data that's specific to that application. So the data that I'm talking about, for example, this customer is a new customer. This customer has expressed interest. This customer has made a payment. This customer has attended the hackathon. This customer wants to attend the next hackathon, and so on and so forth. So that is app data. So Hilarion gives you a way of storing application data within that table for that particular customer, right? So customer X will have their own metadata, will have their own messaging history, their own payments history, and their own app data as well. So if you have an app, for example, for hackathons, you will store that app data in that particular customer. And then let's say, because of the hackathon, you now want to send information on courses. Maybe you build another application for education, like an edtech app. And you want to use this data that you've been collecting on this user to send them data on edtech. You can then store the data on the edtech app inside the app data element as well, and that will be for a different app now. So you'll now have like app data for the hackathon and then app data for edtech. Let's say you want to give this user a way to access a loan. Let's say they want to attend a course and they don't have money, so you want to give them a loan. So you can then build a loan application and store that for that particular customer. You store their loan information. How much money have they borrowed? How much money have they paid? And so on and so forth. What's their credit history? You can now update that as a separate app for that particular customer. So this customer will have their metadata, so their age, their gender, and so on and so forth. They will have data for their hackathon app. So the hackathon app is purely thinking about hackathons, getting people to attend hackathons, sending them information on where these hackathons, when are they happening, is it close to you, and so on and so forth. You will have data on their education, their learning experience, so which courses are they interested in. Of course, you know which languages they're interested in, so you could even store things like which language they like in the metadata, and you can use that to send them relevant course information on that. And then ultimately, they want to attend a course, they want to borrow some money so they can pay for that. Maybe you get into an agreement with JKUAT and they're like, okay, we can actually provide this learning and you guys facilitate the loans. So you build that as an app as well that you now connect to that customer. So all this time, you've been building for one customer, right? So you've built that application for Ian and he's happy, and you've tested and you're sure that it works for Ian. But when you go to the real world, you need this to work for thousands of customers, right? You need this to work for millions of customers, potentially, if you're really successful. So how do you go from working for one customer to working for all these customers? And that's where the Hilarion magic kicks in. You don't have to do anything. So the fact that you've tested for this one customer, when we now start getting requests from thousands of customers, we actually auto-scale your application for you. So we take this application and we take the state and we make it accessible. We deploy it in a cluster. So Hilarion is deployed in a huge clustered application. So as your customers scale, we scale that infrastructure for you. So you don't now have to start thinking about, okay, I used to use MySQL, and now I need to move to Cassandra because I'm getting too many requests. Or I need to put a Redis cache, I need to do this, I need to do that. Hilarion provides that infrastructure to you. And all you have to do is build using JavaScript, using PHP. We have SDKs for Java, Python. We're going to have SDKs for Ruby and other languages. So you provide this, you use this simple SDK, it connects to our application, to Hilarion, and then Hilarion now handles how do you scale this data across all these different customers who are trying to access your application. So essentially, you go from, if you are to build this, let's say you are to build this suite of applications without Hilarion, you need to start thinking about customer identity, you need to start thinking about how do I store this data. So you start setting up MySQL DBs, you set up maybe Cassandra, you set up Kafka so that you can handle tons of requests, you set up Redis so you can manage application state as the customer goes through your application and so on and so forth. But with Hilarion, you don't need to do any of that. You just build this application and it can literally take you an afternoon to build this logic. It's not complex logic. It's like, if new customer, do this. If existing customer has expressed interest, do this. If existing customer has not expressed interest, do that. So very basic things that you can actually build. You can build that in an afternoon, deploy it within Hilarion, and then that experience can be scaled to all your customers without you having to write any more code. So you just provide the business logic, and all the infrastructure requirements that are required to scale this are provided for you by Hilarion. So that's the experience that you get. On the building side, you get that experience, so you can build quickly, you can build faster, you can personalize. Personalization is one of the toughest things. So I'll give you an example. So we built Hilarion because we had a customer during COVID. We had a customer in Nigeria that wanted us to build an application that will disburse funds to all these users. And they said, we have millions of users, the government is behind this, so we want to have this application. And then they started talking about personalization. They're like, oh, we want this to work over USSD. If the user is on this bank, do this. If the user is under this age, blah, blah, blah. So for us to build that experience in a way that was scalable, we had to create all this infrastructure. So we had to build all these clustered applications. We had to think about things like Kafka and so on. So that application took us 6 months to build from start to finish, using technologies like Scala, using Cassandra, using Kafka, and then for analytics, using Spark, using all these different applications to build. But then ultimately, the customer wanted the code for the application, right? And we were like, you know what? It's too much. We can't give you all this IP. So we decided let's provide an SDK or a way for the customer to deploy the application within our infrastructure, but then without having access to all that infrastructure that we've actually built from the ground up. And that's where Hilarion was born. So today, if that same customer came to me and told me, I have this deal, I need something that scales to millions of users, it needs to be personalized, it needs to work across WhatsApp, USSD, SMS, plug into Flutterwave, blah, 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 it'll probably take me an afternoon to do all that work. Because all I have to do is be like, okay, so tell me what your customer needs to experience when they interact with your application. And I write a simple JavaScript program that says, okay, this is a new customer, do this. This customer has money in their wallet, send them the money. If they don't have money in their wallet, collect money from them. Collecting money from them, send them an SMS. If they respond to the SMS, tell them to dial this USSD, blah, 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 blah. Very simple logic. And if I build that logic within Hilarion, I can now tell this customer, hey, here is your application, it's in JavaScript, here is your business logic, and be confident that when that customer now goes to the national radio and says, let's everyone dial *439# to access money for COVID, my application is already scalable. I don't have to worry about, and at this point, I don't even have a database. I didn't have to connect to I didn't have to create any MySQL instance and think about scaling databases. I didn't have to create any Cassandra clusters. I didn't have to get on Kafka and set up Zookeeper and all these different random things that you need to do in order to just scale your application. And I can build this in any language. I can do this in JavaScript. I can do this in Python, in PHP, in the language that I'm most comfortable in, and provide a very personalized, highly personalized experience for all these users that are dialing in to access this application. So that is half the magic of Hilarion. And then as Hilarion, as your customers are going through these applications, the other thing that Hilarion does is it generates events. Events are just facts. So a fact is user has been sent this message. User has responded to this message. This message was delivered. This message was not delivered. User has made a payment. User has, and with Hilarion, we've extended this to even capture events from your website, events from a mobile app. So user has started a shopping cart. User has logged in. User has done something on my mobile app, and so on and so forth. So all these things are being collected as events, and they're being stored in a data lake, right? And this is part of the product that we still haven't released, but that's coming in phase 2, where we have all this data on all the users. And that is now going to be accessible to you. And we've now layered Spark infrastructure on it, so you can now do machine learning on it. So if you now want to say, okay, first Hilarion gave you this cache, this very hot, in-memory, quick access to every customer's, a snapshot of who this customer is and what's their recent activity, so you can build this personalization. On top of that, Hilarion will give you access to this historical event store, where you can now say, okay, I want to do I want to run some, I always say random forest because it sounds like the most random algorithm in machine learning. I want to do a random forest algorithm on all the events that have happened. So let's say you build this application for the hackathon, for loans, for this, and you now want to figure out which customers are most likely to get a loan from me, depending on their hackathon attendance, the language they're using, their what they want, and so forth and so on. Are they a student, and so on and so forth. So you can now write that machine learning job and run it in the data that we've been collecting as your application has been used by your customers. And remember, all this is going to be accessible to you on JavaScript. So you don't have to, again, now start thinking about, okay, so how do I deploy Spark? How do I deploy Kafka? How do I deploy, a data lake? How do I do all this work? We've done that for you. As your application is running, we're creating this history of this customer, and then we give you access to that using the same SDKs that you use to build your application. So the same SDKs you use to build your experience, you can now use that same SDK to now be like, okay, run this machine learning job and give me the 10 customers who are most likely to to get a loan from me, or who are most likely to churn from my application, and so on and so forth. So that's something that we provide for you just because you built on Hilarion. So basically that's the idea. So as much as, yes, you have Africa Stocking, you have Twilio, you have Flutterwave, you have Paystack, you have all these providers who are giving you access to all this infrastructure. So AT gives you access to telcos, Flutterwave gives you access to banks, Paystack, Twilio gives you access to the world, so you can send messages to anyone. You have Facebook Messenger, you have WhatsApp, you have Instagram. So you have all these touch points that you can use to access your customer. But all these platforms do not give you this single view of the customer, and they don't give you that unified, very fast access to your customer snapshot. So your code can't just see who is Ian, who is Limo, who is MK, who is this customer. Hilarion gives you access to that as you're building your application. And on top of that, we also give you unified APIs. So if you want to send a message with Hilarion, if you want to send a message, sending an SMS is the same as sending a WhatsApp, is the same as sending a message to the Facebook channel, is the same as making a call. So you can actually send a message that is actually initiating a call with the user. Is the same as receiving a message is the same as handling a USSD session, and so on. So we also give you this unified API where you can access all these different communication channels with your customer, and at the same time we are giving you this database this table that is personalized for each customer. So each customer is given this table that you can then use to quickly see what are their most recent messages. And a simple use case, for example, could be have messages to this particular phone number been failing. So do I need to keep using this phone number? When is the last time this customer used WhatsApp to access your application? So you can start making these decisions on how best to engage this customer and personalize that experience. So that's Hilarion, and that's V1, I guess, of Hilarion. So you can see where we're going with this. So on top of providing this infrastructure, I've mentioned the analytics, giving you ability to understand your customers at a group level. So all your 100, 1,000 customers, what are their characteristics? Can you cluster them? Can you reach them better? Can you target them better? And then ultimately giving you these building blocks where you can have this state accessible to you in memory on demand. So in Hilarion, you can say, give me this customer state, and we will go into the DBs, we will reconstruct that customer and bring it in memory in a matter of seconds. So you don't have to, again, if you're doing this on your own, you can think about how many tables you need to hit to see which messages you sent them, to see which activities they've had, to see. We give that to you in seconds. So you don't have to think about how to build and scale this database, and we give you that guarantee of scale. So Hilarion is horizontally scalable, so we can scale horizontally to any number of users. So when you now have your application and you put it on radio and suddenly it becomes very popular, you don't have to again go back to the drawing board and start thinking, how do I rewrite this application to make it scale? Building on Hilarion means it already scales. So we're not here to replace AT, we're not here to replace Twilio, we're not here to tell you that we can deliver messages better than AT or Twilio or any of these other providers, or we can complete payments. For example, we are adding Daraja as one of the APIs, so you can now get the M-Pesa data for your customer. And for payments, we also give you a way to organize these payments. So you can organize your payments by customer. So you can give each customer their own wallet as well. So every customer can have, so instead of having this separate wallet infrastructure where you're like, okay, so how much have I received from this customer? How much have I sent to this customer? Hilarion gives you that within that particular database as well. So you can now say, I have 10 shillings from this customer, I have 100 shillings from this customer. So you can organize your money as well. So on M-Pesa, you can already write the code. We're going to plug in M-Pesa with Daraja. That's something we're working on. So you can build these fully fledged applications using maybe 5-10% of the code you will need if you were to start from scratch. So to give you an example, if I was competing with another developer and I was building from scratch and they were building on Hilarion, they built 10 applications before I finished my first one. So that's basically the idea. How do we make this infrastructure so readily accessible? How do we make state management a first-class experience for you as you're working with this SDK? So you think state management, even as you're designing your experiences today, think about Hilarion is giving you a way to manage state. Once you have a very easy way of managing state, you can personalize to no end. So you can think all the channels you can use, whether it's email, whether it's SMS, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's calls. Think about collecting data. Let's say you have a website, you can now link the username on the website to a phone number. So when something happens on that username, you link it to that phone number. So you can now send, like let's say you build an e-commerce application, you can say this user started this shopping cart. So let me set a reminder. Hilarion allows you to set reminders as well. So you can set a reminder in 5 minutes. If this user has not interacted with this shopping cart, let me send them an SMS and remind them to finish the shopping cart, or let me send them an email. So you can start linking all these interactions using a few lines of code. So you don't have to now start thinking, okay, so how do I build persistent timers? How do I connect to an email provider? How do I connect to all these guys? Hilarion gives you that, straight from the shelf. So it's about productivity, it's about speed to market, it's about personalization, and ultimately it's about analytics. It's about understanding your customers, so giving you that access to all these events that allow you to understand who your customers are. So that's the product. We've been working on it for a couple of years, I think, and we're very excited. So you guys are, some of the very first users of this product. It's a global product as well. And I should also mention that as we develop Hilarion, part of what we want to do is we want to have a marketplace where applications that you build can be consumed by customers globally. So let's say there's a business in Minnesota. I always say Minnesota because it just sounds far. That is selling shoes, and they have an Instagram page, and they have a Facebook page, they have Twitter followers, and so on and so forth. But they don't have a way of personalizing their engagement with all these people that come to them from these touch points. So you could actually build that application on Hilarion, and then when that business gets an account on Hilarion, they can start using that application. And what we will do is we will share revenues with you. So if you build that application and it's adopted by users anywhere in the world, you could say, I went for that hackathon in 2021 and I just got $2,000 this month because apparently people are buying shoes like crazy in Minnesota, or like, whatever it is. Think about any use case. So as Hilarion grows, as we get more users coming into the platform, there's a chance for you to even monetize whatever you build, even if it's not for your own business. If you want to build something that is going to be visible on that marketplace, you can now start making money from that, and we'll be sending you that check every month. So we'll show you how many credits have this user used, and of that, we'll share with you revenues on an agreed rate, and so your code can start making money for you, even as you pursue your studies, or so you can do whatever you want with that money.